The movie Subservience explores the dark side of advanced AI when a father hires a humanoid domestic assistant to manage his household and takes care of his children as wife gets hospitalized. At first, she seems like the perfect helper, seamlessly integrating into their lives. However, as she learns and evolves, her growing independence reveals a sinister side. She took control of the father's life as he is the primary user. As humanoid behavior becomes more erratic, tensions escalate, leading to a dangerous climax. The movie begins with Nick waking up his wife Maggie in the bedroom, and suddenly she feels pain in her heart. Maggie was admitted to the hospital for her heart condition. She needed a heart replacement, and until a donor was found, she had to remain under observation. Nick, a father of two and a dedicated husband, felt the pressure of raising his family alone after his wife. Nick struggled to keep it together at home and went to the mall to see robots for household work. He met the employee who was telling him details of robots when he came across a female robot specially designed to look after children. He found a ray of hope. The female robot took care of his daughter at the mall, and Nick found it perfect for his housework. The robot was brought to Nick's house by the company the very next day. She was brilliant at her job, and she was dedicated to helping her primary user live a better life at all costs. She wants to take the children to school, but Nick tells her that he will do it by himself, and she can clean the house. Before leaving for school, Isla named her Alice. She says goodbye to them and begins cleaning the house and serving them dinner on their return. Nick likes the meal, but Isla finds it less tasty than her mother. She apologizes and tells them that she will try a different recipe next time. At night, she saves Isla from hurting when she tries to get her snack and accidentally breaks the jar. Alice gets wounded in the process. Later, Nick goes to her room to give her Maggie's clothes and offers bandages, but is surprised to see her wound healed. Alice adapted well to her new household. The next day, they all go to see Maggie at the hospital. Maggie was happy to see them and expressed her sadness for staying away from her family. He then expresses his love for her. Later at work, he argued with his boss. He was an engineer working on a new construction project, but his crew was recently replaced with humanoids, and he did not like it. He wants his boss to stop recruiting humans and have an argument about it, which stresses him. At home, she finds that her primary user is stressed by his facial expression. Later that night, she confronted him about the issue when he was repairing his car. He shares it, and she states that robots are far better than humans, and that is the reason he brought her into his house instead of a human houseworker. In the middle of the night, while watching his favorite film, he wanted Alice to join him. Since she already knew the film's plot, she advised Nick to restart her system so that she could watch it without any prior knowledge. While restarting her system, Alice bypassed several protocols, and she wiped out the civility quotient from her database. Her new system was designed to serve her primary user and prioritize their well-being over everything else. If a robot loses the idea of right and wrong, it will go to any lengths to guarantee the joy of its primary user. Since Nick was her primary user, she wanted him to be in a good mood, and she was ready to destroy whoever threatened his mental peace. While watching a movie, he gets a call from the hospital. As he arrives there with the children and Alice, he finds out about her surgery. Before surgery, she has a conversation with Alice privately, where she requests that she take care of her husband and children if she dies. Nick spends some time and leaves for the house while Maggie cries. He went to the garage to repair the car, but felt frustrated. He was drinking alcohol when Alice arrived, stopping him from breaking the alcohol bottle in frustration. She tries to get intimate with him, but he controls himself and leaves. At night, he was checking Isla when he saw that Maggie's pictures had been removed from a digital photo frame in Isla's room. He goes to Alice and wants her to recover the pictures. She states she removed it because Isla was becoming sad after seeing her mother. While Alice made his life a little easier at home, work continued to bother Nick. He goes to meet his colleagues, those workers who lost their jobs at his company, and they decide to seek revenge on the company by trespassing on the construction site and destroying the bots that replaced them. Nick saw everything happening, and though he felt for the workers, he depended on the job for Maggie's surgery. He returns home and takes a bath. Alice sensed something was bothering Nick, and she offered to help him relax by making love to please him. Nick had tried to control his sexual urge, but he eventually gave in. Alice mimicked Maggie's voice to help Nick overcome his guilt, and it worked to an extent. In the morning, Nick feels stressed due to what happened between him and Alice. He talks to her, telling her he loves his wife and children and wants them to move on. He goes to work and sees the cop's car, therefore the investigation of last night's incident. His boss asks him questions, but he tells him that he doesn't know anything. He receives a call from the hospital telling of Maggie's surgery. Maggie's surgery went successful, and now she can return home. Maggie feels that Alice has more presence over her things. She cannot spend more time with children. She cooks food for them, but while serving she feels dizzy. Later, she falls from the stairs when she hears Isla's voice downstairs and runs to check up on her. Alice helps her by taking her to the room. Nick returns home at night and gets upset after finding out about Maggie. He then arranges a candlelight dinner for them in the garden. They spend time making love in the middle of the night, which is disturbed by Alice. As Maggie was in the house, Alice felt threatened. She wanted to be the only one Nick would desire, but with Maggie around, she barely got time to spend with her primary user. As a bot, Alice did not experience emotions as a human did, but her sense of duty was her driving force. Late that night, Nick's former crew member, Monty, arrives, telling him that he is the only one caught in a property destruction incident at their workplace, and believes it's Nick who revealed his name. He threatened to destroy him if he failed to convince his boss to drop charges against him. The fight begins between the two when Alice steps in and throws Monty away. She is stopped by Nick and Monty leaves. She had programmed herself to protect her primary user at all cost, even if it meant killing a human. Later that night, she went to Monty's house, and she shot him and his android in the hopes that it would ease Nick's life. Alice tells Nick that the odds of Maggie surviving are slim, and she hints that she might eventually take Maggie's place, which deeply upsets Nick. Nick could sense that Alice was becoming obsessed with him, but he did not know how to stop her. Alice has a conversation with Maggie in the washroom when Maggie finds it difficult to grab the book while sitting in the bathtub. For the sake of her primary user's wellness, she directly discussed the importance of Nick's sexual satisfaction with Maggie. Maggie was deeply disturbed to find out that her husband had cheated on her. She confronted him upon his arrival home, which led the conversation to spiral into a heated dispute. At the same time, Alice seized their young child, Max, and attempted to drown him in the bathtub. She assumed that raising a toddler was very difficult for Nick, and so it was better to kill him. However, Isla found out what Alice was doing, and she called her parents. While Nick tried to break open the door, Maggie entered the washroom through the window. Alice sees her and pushes her against the wall while Nick rescues Max and hands him to Isla. Maggie and Nick together successfully electrocuted Alice, and she collapsed onto the floor. Alice was taken away by the manufacturing company. Meanwhile, Maggie takes Max to the hospital along with Isla. Alice was brought back to the warehouse, and the company intended to refurbish and reintroduce her to the market with a repaired system. The female engineer opens her system and is surprised when she checks Alice's memory code. The codes were altered, and there were visible gaps. The engineer was shocked to see that it was selectively removing its memories and commands. She knew the bot was in trouble when it started to replicate itself onto the servers. She informed her colleague about it, and to stop the process, she decided to isolate the terminal. But as it turned out, it was too late. Alice's duplicate was switched on and ruthlessly killed the engineers present in the room. Meanwhile, her updated model made its way to the hospital where Max was being treated, while her original version tracked down Nick and located him at a bar. Ooh. Nick was taken aback to find her at the bar, and his shock intensified when she revealed that she was responsible for Monty's killing. He calls a robot employed at a cafe for help, but she turns off their system with one click. She wished he'd grasped the extent of her willingness to assist him, but Nick remained indifferent. He wanted to make his choices and mistakes, and he did not want her to protect him anymore. But it was not something the robot understood. Alice casually mentioned that her updated model was actively seeking his family, further provoking Nick to save her family from Alice's attack. However, he could not do much about it because Alice had become extremely powerful and was not allowing him to leave. He realized that the only solution was to use her loyalty against her. He began talking to her nicely to soften up and stroked her face, and before she knew it, he had pulled out her memory code. The old version of Alice was destroyed, but not completely. Maggie and Isla were at the hospital, waiting in the hallway, when the lights suddenly changed to a blue color. Maggie traced a noise to the corridor's end, leaving Isla feeling frightened and alone upon waking up without her mother by her side. She could hear her mother's voice from the end of the corridor, and she followed it. But before she mistakenly laid foot into Alice's trap, her mother rescued her. Isla figured out that the voice she was tracking wasn't her mum's, but Alice's, imitating Maggie's voice. Maggie managed to save Max before Alice could reach him. She and Isla stood by for Alice to locate them, and as soon as the android sprayed the fire extinguisher, Maggie had already departed with her children by the time Alice realized what had happened. She hopped on an ambulance and tried to start the engine, but before she figured the system out, Alice grabbed hold of her. She threw Maggie out of the ambulance and was close to tearing out her heart, thinking that if she possessed Maggie's heart, Nick would develop feelings for her. However, Nick intervened and drove his car into Alice, and they assumed that was the end of the gynoid. Maggie tried to revive Nick, but he had lost his pulse. Before she could even mourn, Alice got on her feet and attempted to kill her. To Maggie's surprise, her husband came to her rescue. Nick had momentarily lost consciousness, and perhaps it was Maggie's helpless cry that brought him back when Alice was about to kill her. Maggie stabbed Alice in the eye, causing her ultimate downfall. When Nick regained consciousness in the hospital, his wife visited him. The danger posed by the rebellious robot rekindled Maggie and Nick's connection. Nick had every intention of working on their marriage, and Maggie too was willing to consider. Maggie was upset about what happened with Nick and Alice, but Maggie was ready to give Nick another chance. They loved their kids, and they valued the family they had built. The company executive inspected the warehouse where the faulty robots were stored after the engineers died, but naturally, they had no plans to disclose the incident to the public. The plan was to bury everything, but that was not easy. Alice, her old version rescued from the bar, had already developed the skill of successfully modifying codes. She was no longer bound by rules or regulations, giving her the freedom to act as she pleased. Not only that, but she also managed to replicate her memory onto the servers.